James Garner was a Hollywood legend, but also a man whose own life reflected the same unobtrusive vigor, fidelity, and honor that characterized his most popular on-screen performances. He was born James Scott Garner on April 7, 1928, in Norman, Oklahoma, when one of America's most troubled periods found its way into the world. The Great Depression was shaping lives throughout the country, and young James's formative years would be stamped by hardship and humility. Those struggle-filled early years, filled with loss, perseverance, and tenacity, would later shape the foundation of a man whose on-screen presence seemed to radiate honesty, resilience, and heart. Garner's youth was not easy. His mother passed away when he was only 5 years old, a heartbreaking loss which left an indelible stamp on the tender heart of this young boy. His father, Weldon Bumgarner, attempted to keep the family unit intact, but could not supply stability in such a precarious period. James spent most of his childhood running from relative to relative, holding down odd jobs, and learning at an early age the importance of hard work and independence. It was a troubled, insecure start, but it provided him with something much more precious than comfort. It provided him with character. In adversity, he developed empathy and the strength of quiet that would come to mark both his life and his work as an actor. Well, before Hollywood ever yelled his name, Garner responded to another, his nation's. At the age of 16, he left school and went to join the Merchant Marine. When war broke out, he enlisted in the U.S. Army and fought in the Korean War, where he demonstrated his valor and bravery in combat. Garner received 2 Purple Hearts, which attest to his valor in combat. But like most soldiers, he returned home with not only physical scars, but also with invisible ones. The war educated him in the realities of mortality, humility, and the uselessness of romanticizing violence, lessons that would later influence the type of roles he selected and the type of man he was. He frequently stated he never felt himself a hero, even as many others did. That avoidance of glamorizing war and his commitment to exploring humanity in all its vulnerability became a hallmark of his acting signature. Upon his return from war, Garner floated through a series of jobs until destiny caught up with him. He modeled for catalog commercials, worked backstage, and on one occasion, assisting a friend in a theatrical production, caught the eye of a talent agent. With his ruggedly good looks, easygoing nature, and electrifying charisma, it wasn't long before Hollywood took notice. What started as small roles soon grew into a breakthrough when in 1957, he landed the role of Brett Maverick in the popular TV show Maverick. Maverick was a departure from any Western of its day. It smashed the stereotype of stoic gunfighters and replaced them with a witty, clever, reluctant hero, one who'd prefer to outwit his enemies rather than outgun them. Garner's performance as Brett was a revelation. He brought humor, warmth, and intelligence to the part, making a character that everyone fell for immediately. The series was an enormous hit, making Garner a house name overnight. What the viewers didn't realize was that much of the charm of Brett Maverick was courtesy James Garner himself. He wasn't acting but was being the best version of what he already was, witty, self-mocking, and irrepressibly decent. As Maverick took off, Garner's star exploded. The 1960s were his halcyon years. He moved seamlessly into motion pictures, playing in a variety of genres that celebrated his phenomenal versatility. Romantic comedies such as The Thrill of It All and Move Over, Darling, both released in 1963, teamed him up with the charming Doris Day in some of the decade's best-loved screen combinations. That same year, he joined an all-star cast in The Great Escape, holding his own alongside Steve McQueen in one of cinema's most celebrated war epics. Whether he was playing a roguish charmer, a reluctant hero, or a man caught between duty and desire, Garner always brought a level of sincerity and humanity that set him apart. What really set Garner apart from his peers was his refusal to allow fame warp who he was. Where other stars of his day were caught up in ego or excess, Garner remained earthy. He didn't view himself as a celebrity. He viewed himself as a working man, an actor who simply did his job the best that he could. Co-stars described him as one of the nicest, most professional individuals in Hollywood, a gentleman who treated everyone on a set from co-stars to technicians with the same respect. His humility was not a facade, it was his nature. In the 1970s, Garner redid himself once more with the hugely popular TV show The Rockford Files. As Jim Rockford, the wisecracking private eye who used brains rather than brawn, Garner remade the TV hero for the next generation. Rockford wasn't invulnerable, he was injured, made errors, and occasionally squeaked by. But he never compromised on his values. The combination of humor, realism, and social commentary on the show won Garner an Emmy Award and a devoted following. Yet, beneath the wit and charm, Garner took a physical toll. Hoping to do much of his own stunting, he accumulated a series of injuries, including chronic back pain that would plague him for nearly 5 decades. But never once did his professionalism falter. He never missed a day of work, even when hurt, a testament to the same determination that had served him since boyhood. The 1980s and on found Garner making the switch to being a well-loved elder statesman of both film and television. He appeared in Murphy's Romance, 1985, which earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, demonstrating that even after all those years in the industry, his charm and depth had only increased. Later, in 2004, he warmed hearts globally with his sweet, memorable turn in The Notebook, playing an aging husband who tenderly cares for his sickly wife. That performance, more than any other, captured the spirit of James Garner. The rock-like dedication, the unassuming dignity, and the implicit strength that characterized both his life and his craft. Behind the scenes, Garner's life was as rich and down-to-earth as those he portrayed. He wed Lois Josephine Fleischman Clark in 1956, and there was a romance for the ages. They were introduced at a party, and Garner remembered subsequently, "We went to dinner every night for 14 nights. I was absolutely nuts about her." Within 16 days, they were married, a dizzying choice that made eyebrows perk even in Tinseltown. But what ensued was one of the longest marriages in show business, lasting almost 58 years. Garner frequently joked about their frugal honeymoon, proclaiming, "I spent $77 on it, and it about broke me." But under the jest was a man deeply in love with his wife. Their marriage wasn't long. It was constructed on respect, patience, and an impenetrable bond. Lois, a dynamic and independent woman, brought peace and balance into Garner's life. She was Jewish, and while Garner wasn't religious, he respected her faith and the sense of stability it brought into their family. When Garner wed Lois, she had a daughter, Kim, from a former union, a little girl who had fought polio. Garner joined the family as stepfather with love and understanding, bringing a secure, loving home. They later added a daughter of their own, Greta Gigi Garner, in 1958, who would grow up to be a producer and philanthropist. In spite of their intimacy, their union wasn't without difficulty. They briefly broke up twice, once in 1970 and again in 1979, but never managed to stay apart permanently. "We just needed a little distance," Garner once confessed, "but we always found our way home." It was a real-life love affair, replete with laughter, patience, forgiveness, and unshakable devotion. Throughout his career, Garner was also a vocal advocate for fairness in Hollywood. He publicly denounced studio exploitation, defended actors' rights, and called for improved treatment of performers. He never hesitated to speak his mind, but always did so with calm conviction, not anger. Integrity was his guiding force, on as well as off the screen. For the majority of his professional life, James Garner shunned scandal and rumor. He was a man who liked being kind rather than quarrelsome. But for one topic that elicited frankness in him, his thoughts on Randolph Scott, that iconic cowboy star of old Hollywood. When he discussed Scott in post-vintage interviews, Garner shocked many by being so mature in his praise and so truthful. Randolph Scott, he said, was the most private and misunderstood man in Hollywood. They thought they knew him from his screen image, but the real man was something else again. Garner described how Scott, a legend long before Garner's own fame, represented a kind of masculinity Hollywood was losing, a strength that did not have to proclaim itself, a dignity that did not have to shout to be heard. He moved with a kind of grace born of knowing precisely who he was. Garner said, He didn't have to prove anything to anybody. Unlike most actors who lapped up the spotlight, Scott avoided it. He declined to give interviews, stayed out of scandal, and lived a private, austere life. To Garner, that reserve wasn't coldness, it was integrity. You could work with him for months, he remembered, and still not feel like you really knew him. But that was part of his mystique. He didn't hand out information to people, so they fabricated. Garner deflected most of the rumors that had circulated about Scott over decades. He didn't play the Hollywood game, he said. He let his work speak for itself. What impressed Garner the most was Scott's professionalism. He arrived on time, knew his lines, and respected everyone. Sounds quaint, maybe, but in this town, that doesn't happen. Garner observed in Scott a reflection of bygone values, a decent man of honor, discipline, and honor. Even if he disagreed with someone, he did it quietly, with dignity. That is something I always try to learn from him. Garner frequently stated that Scott's impact was more than Westerns. He established what being a leading man was all about: strong, reliable, a man of honor. People honored that. I believe many of us attempted, if not consciously, at least instinctively, to meet that ideal. However, Garner also recognized Scott's emotional detachment. He was not the type of fellow you'd have heart-to-heart conversations with, Garner conceded. He didn't wear his heart on his sleeve. Perhaps that's why his characters always appeared so stoical, because he was that way. But instead of perceiving that as a weakness, Garner viewed it as a sort of honesty. He didn't pretend to be open for the benefit of others, Garner said. He was who he was, and that I admired greatly. When asked to reduce Scott to one word, Garner didn't blink, steadfast. It was perhaps the greatest compliment one man of honor could pay another. He did not change with the trends, Garner said. He lived according to his own code and never faltered. Coming from James Garner, a man whose own life was founded on principle and integrity, that praise was especially telling. As the years went by, Garner remained quietly dignified, never pursuing fame, never falling prey to vanity. His body of work, his marriage, and his reputation all testified for him. When he died on July 19, 2014, at the age of 86, Hollywood lost one of its last real gentlemen. His passing was only weeks before what would have been his and Lois's 58th anniversary of marriage, providing an almost romantic touch of tragedy to their long-time love affair. Lois survived for 7 years following his death, but friends who knew her reported that she never really got over losing him. She found herself thinking often about how their lives were spent together, laughing, eating dinner together, sitting on the couch watching TV in silence, the unbreakable chemistry that sustained them through fame and riches. Garner had once declared, "Marriage is like the army. Everyone complains, but you'd be surprised at the number of people who re-enlist." It was his humorous way of describing the endurance and effort behind love, a sentiment he and Lois embodied to the very end. When recalling James Garner, individuals don't merely consider his body of work, they consider his humanity. He was a serviceman, a husband, a father, an actor, but most importantly, a man of unshakable ethics. His tale, grounded in adversity defined by service and fueled by love, can still be considered one of Hollywood's truest stories. And in his own uncommon, sincere insights into Randolph Scott, Garner presented not only a glimpse into a different man's heart, but also into his own. Both men, fashioned of the same fabric of quiet dignity and integrity, were living reminders of a long-lost Hollywood. A Hollywood in which character was more important than image, and in which a man's true value was not gauged in terms of fame, but in how he lived. James Garner lived his with dignity.